Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I have another fabulous, sexy guest with me today. I have Luna Agneya, who is here with me. And I am so excited to dive into this topic, which we actually haven't really touched a full conversation around in the last while. We've, tons of different podcasts will touch on this topic, but we want to have a whole conversation around what does it really
Mm.
mean to awaken, which is like a lot of people, some people might be already in it, some people will be watching from the sidelines, but everybody's kind of still wondering what does it mean to really awaken, and also at the same time how this awakening and how this liberation that comes from awakening affects the collective. I think this is such an important topic, and I'm so happy to have you here, Luna. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so just getting started, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because it's always much sexier and better from you. So please tell us who you are, what you do, who you serve, and how you got here.
Yeah. So yeah, my name's Luna. I run the Sensual Arts School. I usually go by Sensual Artistry for my personal stuff and coaching. Also created a tantric fusion breath work, like mixing modern breath work and traditional tantric yoga. That's called the Bindu Breath Awakening. And I also teach other facilitators. I mostly thrive in running online live spaces like retreats and workshops and stuff. I'm currently based in Thailand, so I'm doing lots of workshops and offerings both for singles and couples. And yeah, then I also teach other facilitators under Evolving Eros. So I'm one of those like people that just can't just focus on one topic and just do one thing. I love keeping it fresh and having a lot of different things, but it's all kind of under this banner of love and liberation. Like I'm really,
Mm,
yeah, that's where my passion is, everything to do with love, sensuality, and then, yeah, the tantric path of awakening and liberation.
perfect. I love that. Yeah, it's really tricky to narrow down to just one person that we help in this realm because I find it helps so many singles, couples,
Mm,
different ways. It can help in business, it can help with money, it can help with body, it can help with sexuality, it can help with relationships. It's all
yeah.
this. I like the big umbrella of love and liberation.
Yeah, lots of flavors
Yes,
under the umbrella. And,
I
I
love
find like,
it.
I just have particular kind of people that are drawn to my work because, I don't know, they tend to be neurospicy, creative, artistic, kind of edge dweller people like myself that tend to be drawn to me. So I prefer not to like pigeonhole an age or gender or whatever for that because it tends to
Mhm.
be a big spectrum, but then like a particular flavor of people that, like challenging the norms and like having a really good time and having a lot of fun and play while they do it.
Perfect, perfect. So let's dive in. What does it mean to really awaken to you? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts around this topic?
Yeah, well, I find it so interesting because I mean, when you ask a classroom, like one of my teachers, that's one of the first things he does in his big chats is like, what do you think awakening means? And, most of people's answers are not what awakening means in Tantra or in other spiritual traditions like Buddhism and stuff. So a lot of people say, like, yeah, you're exiting the matrix, you're like challenging the government, you're aware of fluoride in the water. And, like there's this perception in the kind of modern new age that awakening is this aspect, which is actually kind of more what is considered Shaktipat in the tantric tradition, which is usually when you first start taking your spiritual path seriously, when you first kind of start finding a teacher, and that's the start of the process to maybe at some point awaken and it's not actually awakening. So it's a part of the process what people are describing, but it's not even the first official stage of awakening. So like different traditions, and even within the tantric tradition there's so many different maps where they're like there's 7 stages of awakening, there's 3 stages of awakening, there's 5 stages. So I hear like different maps all the time, but there's a similar thing that says that like one of the first stages is when you realize that who and what you thought you were is a concept and an illusion. So, if I say like, oh, I'm Luna and I'm a tantra teacher and I'm a, rebel and, anything that I've said, like that's me. And I consider these aspects like being a female, being Australian, like all these things, when you realize that they're all just words and concepts and that like what you actually are is none of those things. Like that's just a
Mm.
label and it's not even really real. So
Yeah,
what
they're
you
made
are
up
is like
concepts,
constantly changing.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
they're
all just
totally
words
made
and
up.
concepts and labels, and they don't actually really mean anything. And then, after that, you start seeing everything that you look at as a concept. Like, every tree is completely unique, completely beautiful thing, but, you just see it and you think tree, 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 and you just have this like one overview of everything. So, then you start realizing actually everything's just a concept, like not just that. And then there's like awakening into like the non-dual aspect of reality, which is recognizing that like even the idea that like you and I are separate is a concept and is just like a perception, but that like through meditation stuff, it's hard when you start talking about these layers because like the experience that you start having is something that you can't put in words because words are just
Hmm.
more concepts. But through meditation you start recognizing that actually what is looking out of my eyes is the exact same thing looking out of your eyes, which is the exact same thing looking out of other people's eyes. And we all have different like stories and filters and traumas and all these things like affecting the way that we perceive the world, but like that fundamental thing looking out is the same, and it's been the same since we were born until the day we die, and that's like what we call the Shiva, like the eternal
Mm.
element. And then they say there are other stages of awakening where everything is total bliss and you never are upset or angry ever again, and that's when you get to like Jesus Buddha level um awakening, which is apparently when you can walk on water and put a hand through a body, and like that's the kind of thing that most people are probably never going to experience. And there are a few beings that apparently experience this. But like the other layers of awakening, like you can, after some years of practice, actually experience this. And it's not such a rare phenomena. There are actually lots of people out there that experience this. So, when you think of enlightenment, like a lot of people think it's just so far off and so like just for Buddha. Like I used to think, oh, I hope next lifetime I become incarnate as, a young boy in some mountains of Tibet so I can train as a monk and then I can become enlightened. Like I used to think it was this very far off foreign thing
Yeah.
that you had to be really lucky. But then I started learning through doing this spiritual work of like, actually, it can just take a few years to fundamentally shift the way that you perceive reality and to have like a level of awakening that will make your life significantly better in like every single way, except that yeah there's a bit of a struggle with the fact that like other people are so not perceiving that way and you're just like, oh, it's so simple, I wish everyone could then the world
See
would be
it,
a much
feel
better
it,
place. But
taste it. Yeah, because that is, a really big difference and a really big point that brings us back to like how our liberation affects the collective, right? Like
mm,
when more people become more free and more open and more awake. I actually don't use the word awake a lot. I use more, what is the word I use? Okay, I'm pulling a full blank. We're very early in the morning for me here to make sure we
conscious.
hit
Just
record
more
with Luna.
conscious or
More conscious, yeah, more conscious. There's another word. It'll come to me, but it's not coming
yeah,
to me right now. But more present as well, right?
yeah.
More connected, there is kind of an awake, a noticing. Yeah.
Mm.
But let's move that into, and we're going to come back to it because I also want to play with, how can people start to shift their reality if we can do it actually right now. How can people start to shift their reality if they want to start seeing things in a more liberated, more woke. I don't like using the
Yeah.
word woke, to be honest, but more
Woke means so
enlightened
many different things
way,
now as well.
right?
But
Yeah, I know. More enlightened way, more present,
yeah.
more grounded. How does one, in your opinion, start shifting the reality from the limiting beliefs to the
Mm.
more present, awakened, conscious lens?
Yeah. So the core practice, which is a core part of tantric practice, which you won't learn in neo-tantra workshops most of the time, is inquiry. So Byron Katie's The Work is one of the most famous
Mm.
inquiry methods, which I love giving to people because she just made it so simple of there just being like these questions that you just kind of go through where you start questioning your thoughts and your beliefs about other people, your thoughts and beliefs about yourself, your thoughts and beliefs about the world. So that's kind of like that
That
first
is
stage
powerful.
awakening is when you start seeing that a lot of your thoughts are, yeah, just like concepts based on your conditioning and that they're not actually true and that a thought could never even really be true because it's just a thought and what we're actually perceiving is very different. So I love like, yeah, inquiry processes like that. I actually, yeah, even have I call it embodied inquiry. I love like bringing in somatics with it. So I have like a free one on YouTube for embodied inquiry where we kind of combine some of this Byron Katie method of questioning your thoughts about yourself, but then also bring in the body, which I find is really powerful. And it's something that's so simple, but can like radically change the way that you're thinking about yourself and your thoughts. So
Yeah,
there's
I
that.
concur
And then
on
there's
that
just
one.
like, yeah, and then there's meditation. And these days when people think meditation, like it's such a big category. And actually, like most styles of meditation don't lead to awakening. They're just like relaxing, or, they make you feel a little bit happier, or, maybe they like help you integrate your psyche a little bit. But there's like very specific meditations that are for awakening. So like my favorite teacher for this is Adyashanti. He does these amazing meditations. He has like 30-day wake up challenge and some like audio books with guided meditations and stuff. And there's a specific way that teachers can start pointing out and you're exploring it in your direct experience of being like, okay, well, I'm meditating, like, yeah, who am I? What am I? Like, look at all those labels and then be like, what is the thing that's noticing the labels? And, you start doing this very specific kind of meditation where you're looking like, okay, do my thoughts actually come from in my head? Or where do they actually come from when I really look? Like, where is a thought? Is a thought from within me, or is it like this thing that's kind of like moving around me that I'm noticing? And then like the thing that's doing the noticing is the thing that is actually more my fundamental nature. So like you can't really bypass doing like actual, seated
Hmm.
meditation. So when I was really going deep into this process, there was like a good year where it was every day I was doing like a half-hour meditation with my main teacher Christopher Wallace, or with Adyashanti, or with Sam Harris, or a few teachers that were teaching this because they all have like slightly different ways of pointing this out. But it does require, to sit and look and actually witness and study your experience, because that's what tantra essentially is at its core, is like a kind of science of studying what it is to be consciousness, what it is to be a body, and like how you
Mm.
interact with life as whatever it is that you are. So a lot of it is like, it's not just a concept of like, oh, we are all one. It's like, what does that actually mean in your direct experience? It's like Tantra is not a religion. It's not about like, we're telling you this is how it is and you just believe it. It says like, here's tools for you to experience that and see it for yourself and
Yeah.
actually be like, oh, that's actually truth. Like that actually is true. Like I heard the philosophy and the concept, and now I'm like, oh wow, I know what you mean. Like I actually experienced that without a doubt. So a
I
really good
feel
teacher
it.
is essential for that. Mm,
Mm, yes, thank you. That helps. And yeah, Byron Katie's work is powerful.
mm,
Um, it's funny, the very first time it was introduced to me, maybe it was the day mood I was in, but I did not like it the very first day,
mm,
even though I was very used to looking at things in many different ways by that point. And then it actually took me going back a second time, like not on a in a call with other people, like just going in and doing it on my own. Then it was like, oh, and once you see it, you're like, oh, and you're like, okay, and
yeah, and
it's
it hurts
quite
your ego a
cool.
little bit at first. You're just like, oh no, oh, I'm
Ah,
such a hypocrite. Oh no.
teeny bit.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd already done enough work that it didn't kill my ego, but I was like, okay, it is what it is. And I noticed it. But yeah, ego dissolving is such a important part as well of actually just,
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like that painful death. I mean, that's part of the process. Like when you are awakening, like people think it's about like getting somewhere or achieving a new state, but it's really like a complete death of your ego and your
mm,
self-concepts. And you know, it's a very brutal process, and that's where like Kali Ma is the goddess of this process, and she's the devourer, and she'll cut your head off, which is like your ego, like the head
Yeah.
that she's holding is your ego. And you know, it's this seeing that it's like it's painful and it's brutal and it's a death, but then when you get through the process, you see that it's love, like that she is an
Mhm.
embodiment of love, and it seems brutal and painful and like it, you know, it's a very challenging
Mhm.
process to go through. And the only way out is through, like, you just got to keep going once you start. Like, there's just no stopping once
Surrender,
you're on that roll.
trust. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and there's this deep surrender and trust. I think that's really important with some of the work that we also have learned and studied under Layla of really first allowing us to create that trust and safety in our body that we can keep coming back to a core, to a center, because some of
Mm,
this work, yeah, can be really, really challenging. And if you're not ready for it, it can spiral you out. This is, more deeper levels than, um,
yeah.
right. But you do want to cultivate that trust and that safety and that
Yeah.
connection and truth within yourself so you can learn how to listen to it, I think. It's been
Yeah,
my
and they say like, you know,
GPS.
if you're going to offer your head to the goddess, make it a pretty head. And you got
Ha!
to build that sense of self first. And you know, another I'm listening to a book at the moment that's kind of about like some of the sacred sexuality elements of Judaism. And you know, they were, yeah, talking about like these three stages of consciousness, and saying that if people try to go from one to three, which is like from the kind of typical way that most people interact to like non-dual bliss and awakening, that the middle stage is like the personal. It's like having boundaries, having like me
Mm.
and you, and like I am worthy and I deserve and I have needs. And if you try to skip that, it all implodes, and it's like not a good thing. So like people need to work on the personal, they need to get good boundaries, they need to learn self-love and self-respect to be able to then, you know, off with
Cut
the
off
head,
your head. Yeah,
dive
yeah.
in,
Which
and to surrender in that level. Otherwise, yeah, like things start going wrong and you start bypassing some of the important aspects.
Yeah, that's a really, really key point. I think a lot of people want to get to the other side of just feeling happy all the time. And that's not what it also is. It's about being able to be with everything that we are, the highs, the
Yeah.
lows, the extra highs, the extra lows, right? Like the emotion, the
Yeah.
grief, the rage, the anger, the fear. And
Yeah.
again, we can't
It's all the
bypass this.
goddess.
Yeah, we have to hold it all. And the more that we hold, more of the, lower vibration, for lack of a better word, the heavier, more shadow work, the fear, the grief, the anger that people don't always want to touch. We like to, push that under the rug and sweep that away for so many years, many
Mm,
generations have.
yeah.
And it's the more we go into it that we actually get to actually have the more highs on the other side and expand and play and feel more and be more and feel more gratitude and feel more love and feel more compassion and this openness and expansiveness that is just delicious. But we have to be able to go into our shadows, of what we call shadows, right? The underworld, the
Yeah.
stuff that we ignore, including our ego.
Yeah. Yeah, because like people here kind of, you know, when you awaken and like in a way you have no more problems anymore, and people think that means that you're just happy all the time, but it's like, no, it's like I feel like shit today, but it's not a problem. I recognize that like life is a series of, you know, ups and downs and wild rides, and that like there's always a lesson in the shitty feeling. There's always medicine in it. There's always some kind of reason or purpose, if you want to call it that. But it's like you learn to just like ride the waves and to not make them wrong. And it's like, okay, I'm in contraction now. Okay, I'm in expansion now. Like I'm in contraction
Yeah.
now and it's going to be over soon. And you know, so you stop, and that's what we call like suffering, is when you're making your experience wrong. It's like you can
Hmm.
be like, yeah, super crampy on your period and like bitching at the world, but you can just like really lean into it and just be like, yeah, I'm in a crampy, bitchy day today. So I'm just going to lean in and roll with that. Compared to when you're like, oh no, I shouldn't be like this and I need to be different and I have to be
Hmm.
performing and I have, you
What's
know,
wrong
like
with
that's where
me?
our suffering
Yeah.
happens, because we're like
Yeah.
fighting against reality. Though I do hear that, you know, there is some level where like one of the teachers I was learning from says that, you know, he just never really felt angry or anxiety or anything, but then he missed a flight and felt it, and he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Is this what people call anger?" But then he's like, "Oh, it actually feels like the fire and turn on of my spiritual practice. I actually kind of enjoy this."
Huh.
And so there was like actually this enjoyment of this feeling of activation, being like, "Oh, that's an interesting experience," because it was such a rare thing for him, because he'd really like cultivated for his whole life, a lot of the bliss body practices. So there definitely is like, yeah, another layer, which, maybe one day I'll also get to experience beyond so many of the highs and lows. But yeah, we're just all
I
of it
can
can be
relate
so
to
vibrant.
that. Yeah, I
Mm.
can relate to that. There is a when I typically, and I always have since the beginning I started practicing, can access my grief so much faster than my anger. And then eventually, after a couple of years, I was able to like tap into my anger, but it was just like little wee types of blips. And it was like, oh, back into grief. Right. But in the last couple of years, I've actually been able to tap into my anger even more. And there is this fire that comes with it. There is this, okay,
Mhm.
now I'm going to get shit done. Like nobody's going to fucking do this, again to me or whichever way. There's this fire where I can move forward with it. It is like an energy to use. So I can totally relate to that.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
an empowering energy, actually. It's
Mm.
interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing when your energy body is open, which is like, the other part, like there's the meditation and awakening, but then there's also like opening your energy body and opening your energy channels. And then like we call it like digesting your experience. So if you're feeling anger, like it can get stuck and repressed and locked down and all that. Or you can let it like flow through your central channel, through your energy field, and then it's fuel, it's aliveness. And
Hmm.
it might be a little bit uncomfortable and you might need to like adjust to holding that energy, but then eventually you're just like, wow, like I'm really pissed off and I feel really alive because of it.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a strong energy, and you can actually
Uh-huh.
find pleasure in that intensity in those moments. But of course, yeah, then there's like the primal trauma response. So also a big part of awakening, like on a nervous system level, is being able to stay in your like social engagement, more balanced center, and not go into trauma response when you are in anger or fear or whatever. It's like, how do I stay in this more um, balanced, open, safe state in my
Yeah.
being, rather than going into primal brain reactionary responses. So that's why I love
Contraction.
like
Yeah.
the overlap between like somatics and all the like trauma healing kind of stuff that we're doing in this modern day, and what Tantra teaches and like these ancient yogic traditions, because a lot of them were actually finding ways to do this kind of like trauma healing. And they had like specific ways of describing trauma and our stories and these patterns. Like they had a whole like psychology in Tantra as well, that I really love the way that they described it. And I find it like a really useful model in the modern day as well. But not many people know about it or teach it as well in the modern
Yeah.
Tantra world. Mm.
How is it different? I'm actually really curious. How is some of the ways that you've noticed of trauma healing through Tantra different from somatics and trauma healing that we have been studying and playing with in our
Yeah,
training?
so there's a lot of overlaps, but we call like samskaras are kind of emotional imprints from past experience. So like instead of having a word for trauma, they say that like every experience that you have, whether good or bad, if you didn't fully feel it at the time, like you didn't fully digest the experience, then it leaves a little imprint. And then every time there's a similar situation, then you won't just be reacting to that situation, you'll be reacting to the past situation as well, which is why we
Yeah.
like overreact to things, because we're not just reacting from the present moment, we're reacting from the past. So, and this ends up with our attachments and our avoidances. So things that, like it even says that if, for example, you're having a lot of unconscious sex, and you're not fully surrendering, you're not fully experiencing it, you can end up with sex addiction, because like
Mm.
if it's like pleasurable sex that you're not really fully feeling, then you're like constantly craving and grasping for more because you're not actually fully experiencing it. So that's where like an addiction comes from. Or if you're having sex that you don't really like and you're not enjoying at all and you keep doing it, then it creates aversion. And then you don't want to have sex anymore. I've got a headache. I'm avoiding because you've created these indents in your psyche from like
Hmm.
constantly doing something you didn't like. So, yeah, it's interesting how it shows that whether it's something pleasurable or negative, if you don't fully feel it and digest the experience at the time, then it leaves an imprint that
In
then
your body.
affects the way that you're experiencing your present moment. So I really like love that approach. And I'm like, wow, it makes so
Yeah.
much sense. And they're
Makes total
describing
sense.
trauma in a way.
Yeah, and interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting because yes, that's what I've been taught as well, which then we can also go in and, do actual de-armoring to release, to remove, to help us
Mm,
finish processing is one way. But I don't know if I had specifically heard it described that way in Tantra, and yet, yes, to everything
yeah.
you just said.
Yeah,
And where
which
is
is
that
why also breath
described?
work's amazing because breath work
Yeah.
is like digesting past emotions that weren't felt before. So when we open up in breath work, it's like all these past samskaras suddenly have a space to be felt and expressed. So that's also why I'm such a big advocate for breath
Yeah.
work, because it is essentially a samskara healing method.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. That brings it all together there and just kind of completed the loop in my
Yeah.
brain. And let's dive into, people are still listening. They're like, okay, but why? Why do I want to awaken? And let's go dive into how our liberation and our awakening does affect the collective, because I think this is so
Mm.
important to what's happening in today's day, more and
Yeah.
more.
Well, when we talk about like the aspect of awakening of like believing your thoughts too much, like that first level of awakening, basically everything bad that's happening in the world comes because people are believing their stories about things that aren't even actually true. So, like
Yep.
war, for example, and like even, currently, like the conflict with like Palestine and Israel is like, there's these stories that people believe of like, you know, I owning land anyway is a concept in a story. I mean, like land ownership is one of the first like stories that someone created that like you can even own the earth, like let alone then like religious stories of like, well, my person talked to God and they said this and my person
Mm,
said that. And like, so this happens on such major scales where people believing thoughts without inquiring, without like knowing about them, then can make people actually kill other people or cause like
mm,
massive destruction because they're like, really, like my thoughts are true. I heard them from my teacher or from my parents or my whatever. And like, they, just not even really, yeah, like questioning those thoughts. And then like basically everything as well is like people's defending their egos. Like, I'm a good person. I'm a this person. I want to be successful. I want people to know me. Like all this greed and capitalistic ways of being and the way that people like destroying the earth, a lot of it comes from need for ego validation, for people to be like,
mm,
I am a strong, successful, smart, sexy, whatever kind of person. So, like, the combination of people needing to validate their egos and to try to, like, have a good story about themselves that, like, I'm a whatever kind of person, mixed with, like, my religion believes this, your religion believes that, like, I own this land, you own that, like, all these stories that people have they literally will kill for. Like they literally will like destroy the world for. So if everyone was like questioning these thoughts and stories within themselves and like doing ego dissolution work, like nourishing themselves up, like, feeling like I'm valid and amazing human just because I exist. Like that's all I
mhm.
actually really need to do is just exist and experience life. Like that's, that's the whole like tantric reason for living. You were born to experience this world. Like that's all you need to do. Everything else is
Yep.
optional. But like you're just here to experience. And yeah, so there's like just so many ways people are constantly trying to like struggle and chase and grasp and cling and destroy and everything just to have like this good self-image. And it's such a like
Mm.
sad joke when you get through it and when you like dissolve it and then you're just like, oh my God, like that was so much weight I was carrying trying to be
Yeah.
someone and achieve something and I don't actually need to. Like, what
And I
was
was
I
just
doing all this?
doing what other people told me to do without being conscious of actually what I was doing, right? It's like the white picket
Yeah.
fence with 2.5 kids and a dog and da, 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 and then these women, get, or men, doesn't matter, right? Get into the situation where they're like, I don't want this. Why? Like,
Yeah.
why did I
I
do
was just
this?
conditioned
Right?
to believe this is what I'm meant to do. And like,
Yeah.
this is what success looks like. I used to work as a stripper and I had so many people during their midlife crisis, coming to the strip club and just being like, I did everything they told me to do and I'm miserable, And they were
Mm,
just so
hmm.
curious for this like free-spirited woman like me, being like, what kind of world do you come from? Where do people like you hang out? Like, how do I explore this other world? And I love that like little touch point because there were people that I wouldn't normally relate to as well because, I was usually in the festival scene and traveling around the world with the hippies and whatever. So it's kind of interesting to get this touch point with people going through that process of dissolution. And, for a lot of people, it comes at a very late time. And then they have a huge
Mm,
amount of grief around so much time that they weren't living their truth and
yes.
they weren't able to explore themselves. And that was one of my blessings was from a young age I've always been a weirdo. So like even before the end of high school I was like going to bush raves in the country and taking
Nice.
MDMA and doing all kinds of crazy things. So like I didn't do the corporate bubble world ever.
But
So
yeah,
I
there's a
think
lot of
that
people getting to
yeah,
midlife that are just like, I did everything they told me to do, right? Got
yeah.
married, had kids, the dog, the career, the this, the that, and
You're like,
I
and it's
am not
boring.
happy. I am
Yeah.
not happy. What there has to be something more. And that's what I hear a lot from my clients. And I heard from myself way back when too, right? There has to be something more. This
Mm,
can't be it because yeah, it doesn't make you happy. It just
yeah.
doesn't bring satisfaction and happiness. And it's not
Yeah.
why we're
And
here.
yeah, and like, now like being, so much on the other side of a lot of that like process and questioning and stuff, I still always have my existential process and
Oh
questioning,
yeah,
it
they
doesn't
still
stop.
show up.
It's always another layer. But there's like a layer that I've got to where I look back and like now, I find there's just this such a like sweet, adorable moment, like meeting people in that space where they're having this dissolution and it's so painful and so confusing, but I'm like, yes, see it, keep going, there is more. And I get like really excited for them. And I like being able to hold that pillar of just like, I trust that you are going to get through this other side of whatever dissolution process you're going through. And like things are going to be better because you're starting to see through the cracks. And, that's one of the
Mm,
things a lot of us are hoping with the whole world situation just getting more and more extreme where people are really seeing through the cracks a lot of all the things that we've been told around like colonialist imperialist countries being so superior and that like oh we're better off and more civilized in the West when actually people are starting to see like actually people in poorer countries seem to be happier, have better health, better well-being. So maybe this
mhm,
idea that money and convenience and all these things that we thought made us more evolved in the West actually aren't the answer and aren't making us happy. Why are all our celebrities like suicidal drug addicts? It's because like that isn't actually the way. That's not the way. And we need to turn back and we need to like re-indigenize and decolonize. And, and this is a big part of Tantra. Like they don't call it decolonizing work, but like the process of awakening and liberation and like questioning all this is a decolonizing process. It's like recognizing all the conditioning that's being dumped on us that isn't true and starting to break through it and find like what is actually true, what's my truth, what's the truth if there is one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. For
Mhm.
somebody who's listening and they're like, okay, I have no really clue what they're talking about, but I feel the pull to what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And I've been listening to all these episodes, binging them probably. Um, what would you say their next kind of
Mm.
step would be? What would be like step one, step two? What can they do to start
Yeah.
moving along this journey and path?
Yeah, well, like it's honoring that pull because that's what we say is like Kundalini. It's like that Kundalini isn't just when your body's shaking, when someone's doing a Kundalini awakening thing, like that's a misperception. Like Kundalini is that pull towards more. It's that questioning, it's that energy that makes you want to go to a tantra workshop or listen to a podcast. Like, so people that are listening to this, chances are already their Kundalini awakening is underway, whether they've had like big shocking experiences or not. The fact that they're curious and asking questions and listening means that like you're already on your process. So like, congratulations, you're on your way. The process has
Mm-hmm.
begun. And then there's just like yeah, there's a learning to really listen to that pull and see like, yeah, where's your curiosity? Whether like a lot of people when they start, it's like they see like, oh, there's Reiki or a cacao ceremony or an ecstatic dance. And like, they hear about it and they feel like this little like, it's like this childhood wonder of like, oh, I'm kind of like, I think that would be really cool to go try it out. And it's like, yeah, follow that impulse, follow that pull when you see an offering, someone posting about something and there's something about it that's drawing you. And there's a lot of like crap in the modern new age scene, but you're just gonna have to sift through the crap. That's just part of the
Yeah.
game these days.
Just gonna
It's
have
like
to
you're gonna,
sift through the crap.
yeah, you go to some ceremonies and they'll suck. But that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're not going to
And
traumatize
that's a
you.
good
But
point. It's a good point because
yeah,
you could go to a retreat or a workshop, and some of them, yeah, there's very different levels of quality and very different types of depth, and some of them will suck. Yeah.
yeah, totally. And sometimes you'd be like, I wasted my money and this was crap, but that's like part of learning discernment. And I mean, ideally, like, yeah, you want to like do your due diligence, especially if you're going to go on retreat with someone. Like I love running retreats. And when I'm even on the sales page, I'm like, read these blogs I wrote, listen to these podcast episodes I said, like, see if
Get a
you
feel for
resonate with
me.
the way that I'm sharing and what I'm speaking about before you commit to an entire week retreat with me. Because like also I only want to spend a week with people that like the way that I present these things and vibe with what I'm teaching. I don't want someone to come and be
Hmm.
like, this is not at all what I expected. But
Hmm.
do your diligence and actually check out their websites and stuff, because there are some people that are out of integrity with what they're offering, and they're doing way too advanced big things and they don't have the training and the backing. But there are a lot of good teachers out there. So it's just trying. And like at first when you're new to this scene, it's good to dabble. But if you want to like awaken and you're resonating with what I'm saying here, basically all the spiritual traditions agree that at least for a year you need to commit to one path, whether that's one teacher or one lineage, but you want to pick one and go deep with it rather than eternally, like in the modern
Yeah.
workshop world, trying like a little bit of this,
Whole
little, it's
pile.
like a
No.
smorgasbord. But
Dig
everyone has
in.
different teachings, and it just gets confusing because everyone's saying contradictory things. So find like a school or a lineage or a teacher that you really vibe with and go deep with that person for a while. And that's where you're going to see real transformation, because teachers that are taking people deeper, we like create a journey, and we very think of like the process that people are going on and craft it based on that. So
That's
to
good.
try things out when you're new, but then to commit to something. Don't just like dabble forever. You want to
Yeah, I
commit for at
like
least a
that.
while. Mm.
I like that. And I like the way that you described Kundalini in that it's not just, the sexual awakening and the moving through your core, but also that pull
Mm.
for more. And I'm curious, um, I've talked to another tantra teacher about this and they weren't quite sure. So I want to hear your take. How do you think um, a Kundalini awakening is different between genders, or is it?
Mm. I mean, in like, I think it's often, there is a kind of typical thing that men often will awaken first in the upper areas down, and women tend to awaken from sexuality up. Like I would say that
Mm,
when I look at a lot of my teachers, when I look at a lot of people that I know, men often enter through philosophy, seated meditation, going to Vipassana, doing inquiry work, kind of going down, then opening the heart, and then kind of going into sexuality. Like that's a very common, like the dissension path. While more often women waken through what we call the red bindu, so through the body, through sensuality, sexuality, dance, movement, yoga, then
mm,
moving up to the heart, bringing the heart in, and then going to the awakening work. So I know that was my gateway, it was like through
yeah,
sexuality, dance, movement, yoga, and then going into the more heart-based emotions, la la la, and then going, that was like the
mine as
last
well.
step, was going into seated still meditation. So it's definitely not 100% of the time that way. Definitely there are men that are drawn first to sexuality work, women that are first drawn to upper chakra work,
Hmm.
but frequently I do notice that there is a favored direction.
Yeah.
And even in like the traditional Tibetan tantric sexual yoga that I've been learning, then we also work with the fact that like there is a often a different flow with where the bindus are and where you're breathing and stuff with men and women. So, that's just, yeah, something
Yeah.
that can be different, but it is different for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And one of the things that I find for women is, I don't know if you just heard that, there was huge thunder outside, is we're in the middle of a storm, is, going back into our sexuality, going back, it's kind of like a portal very quickly. It was for
Mm.
me to go in deep, to really integrate and heal the places that I was disempowered the most. And then it
Mm.
allowed me to kind of do the rest. Thinking that way, does that also relate then to men coming down? Is that where they were also disempowered the most, was through the
Mm.
philosophy or the philosophical? What do you think on that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a disempowerment element, perhaps. Not something I've probably pondered enough to comment on in
Hmm.
this moment, but
Yeah,
I
I'm
will
just kind of
continue to
tossing
ponder that if
around.
there's a connection. Yes, but yeah, and I don't know if it is just an area that, like, yeah, hormonally or something makes a difference. But, in most ancient cultures, women were the teachers of sexuality work. Like most traditions that you look at, the history of sacred sexuality, there's always a connection with sexuality work and females being the leaders and the priestesses and the ones
Hmm.
that offer that pathway. And generally, yeah, it's mostly been men throughout history that are teaching about, non-dual awakening and stuff. And that's why also there's like, yeah, the Shiva
Yeah.
Shakta path. Like Shakta path is goddess worshiping, senses, body, energy, that's the focus. And that's the flavor of reality that you're mostly focused on tapping into, is like the vibrational field. And then the Shiva path is the emptiness, that you're feeling the empty space in which all vibration happens. And yeah, it does seem to just be a thing that, like, men are drawn to the
Hmm.
Shiva path, women are drawn to the Shakti path, and I don't know what
And
it
we
is
meet in the
about
middle.
that. Yeah, exactly.
And
And
we
then,
meet at the heart,
we
right?
yeah, we meet at the
And
heart and
then we
we
can
come
expand.
together with that. And I'm always about, like, yeah, the inner union. And that's like, for me, I was super Shakti, super, like juicy babe. And it was really important for me then with that inner union aspect to come into learning to sit and meditate and experience the emptiness and stuff. Like that was a very vital part of coming into balance and for me to get out of a lot of my, like, really hectic uh ways of being, which were not serving me or anyone that had to relate to me.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
the same, like, yeah, you want to be in partnership. If you are heterosexual and you're having a male partner, you don't want them to just be this like super spacey empty being. You want them to also get in touch with their sensuality and their body and their eros and stuff. So there's this, that's the meeting of opposites internally and externally as well, so we can help each other on the process. Or if you've done the inner union, you often manifest a partner that also has done inner union work, and then you can both flow with both parts together, which is
Play.
really nice.
Hmm. Mm. Such a juicy conversation. I know we could probably just keep going and going and going, but we won't because we don't want to exhaust everybody and ourselves. It's
Yeah.
nighttime there for you too right now, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're going to drop your links in the show notes as well, but please go ahead and tell people where they can find you so they can hear that and what you have going on right now.
Yeah, so I have a few retreats in Thailand if people might want to come on a holiday and enjoy week-long things. I have two retreats. One's like the Sensual Arts retreat, which is sacred sexuality focused. And then the other is the Tantric Arts retreat, which we go into more like the holistic side of Tantra. So also covering death and awakening and liberation and psychology and all those kind of things like we're talking about today. So if you were curious, you could learn more that way. So I have an embodied tantrika online course and a whole bunch of other online courses, also sacred sexuality ones. So if you can't join me there, but you want to hang out online, then I have those offers. And yeah, some freebies like the breathwork modality. I created like a short home practice version, so we can link to that if you want to try out just like a 20-minute tantric breathwork practice, and then the inquiry one that I mentioned earlier as well. So yeah, I can
Yeah.
see all those through.
Tons of yummy offerings. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And we will drop the links in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, for those who are listening, if you just want to learn more and want to dive in and see what the more is, even, we're both open, I'm sure, to connect and to to see what it is you're looking for and see if it feels aligned. And if one of us doesn't feel aligned, but you do want to follow this path, both of us know a ton. If you just want to listen to these episodes, there's like a different sex, love, relationship teacher, coach on every single episode right now for the last many months. But there's so many people that we can put you in touch with. It is such a
Mm,
beautiful path, and it has absolutely changed my life for the better. I can't, like, the better doesn't even describe it. Like that
yeah.
that word means nothing. You have to
Yeah.
feel
It's a
it.
different paradigm. It's
It's a
like
totally
you're living
different
in a different
paradigm.
experience of reality after. So
Yeah.
it's definitely worth
Yeah.
it.
And
Mm,
it's been a beautiful journey, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been the
yeah.
best. So, and thank you so much again for joining me, Luna. I really appreciate you joining me on the show to, yeah, just help people understand Tantra more and the different ways that we can use it to absolutely awaken, to transform ourselves, to transform our lives, to transform the world, and literally go
Yeah.
from there. It is a beautiful journey. So thank you.
Yeah. More love into this world. May it all be for the liberation of you and all people, hopefully one day.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. So thank you.
Right.
Till
Thanks,
next time,
Kimberly.
everyone.